Another day, another mainstream media piece valorizing and glamorizing left-wing radical Hasan Piker, this time in the New York Times, and basically apologizing for terrorism. All this and so much more is coming up in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, our daily show where we take on the craziest stories from across the media and across the internet, all from an independent political perspective. Guys, I'm actually sick of talking about Hasan Piker at this point. We've talked about him so much, and I actually agree that he's getting a disproportionate amount of media coverage and attention compared to his actual relevancy, which is not none, but isn't perhaps as big as the amount of coverage he's getting would suggest. But we cover and discuss what the media is covering and discussing. So here we are once again talking about Hasan Piker. And this time, a truly atrocious, just as a matter of journalism, regardless of whether you agree with the ideology or not, just an atrocious interview published by the New York Times opinion section, a video and text interview with Hasan Piker alongside a writer, a leftist writer from, I believe, New York Magazine, a female writer. And this was conducted by a New York Times culture editor, because apparently Nadja Spiegelman, and because apparently when you're a culture editor, you also do highly sympathetic interviews with the most extreme figures in American politics about political and social theory. That's not what I thought culture editor meant, but go off queen, I guess. Anyway, this interview is going viral for a couple of reasons. One is the way that it's just openly pro theft and crime, and then the way that it really makes barely caveated intellectual justifications and moral justifications for murder and assassination in the case of controversial figures like Brian Thompson, United Healthcare CEO, who was, of course, allegedly murdered in cold blood by Luigi Mangione in this viral incident that actually got so much support because people hate the health insurance industry and think it's harmful. Well, Hasan Piker went to great lengths to attempt to morally justify that kind of extrajudicial vigilante assassination, and we're going to go through all of it. First, let's just take a look at this first clip here because it's quite something. The headline on this article is "The Rich Don't Play by the Rules, So Why Should I? Why Petty Theft Might Be the New Political Protest." Then we've got our three geniuses here, our three socialist stooges. Also, I'm sorry, it's just so funny. As if that image isn't the rich. Three rich people. It's like three people who I'm sure are all worth over $1 million net worth. But go off, queen. Anyway, this headline gives you a good example of how bankrupt the moral logic is. Other people do immoral things, so why shouldn't I? Is actually not a moral justification whatsoever, as we'll come to. But yeah, let's just start the clip because we're going to have a lot of footage to get through. I pulled a couple significant clips from this Times interview. Let's watch.
I'm pro stealing from big corporations because, they steal quite a bit more from their own workers. However, one thing that might even help your ethical dilemma.
Sorry, I just already have to pause on this first point. I'm pro stealing from big corporations because they steal more from workers. One, we're going to get into the numbers. He's talking about wage theft when employers do not pay employees what they are entitled to or what they're supposed to pay them and withhold some of it illegally. And of course, that's wrong and bad. And we'll get into the numbers about whether it's really more. I'm not sure that it is. But regardless, we're already at just twisted levels of moral logic. So if stealing things is morally wrong, if it imposes costs on others, if it violates the rights of others, if it involves doing an immoral action, which I think it does, and I think most people believe that it does, then you actually can't even begin to justify it by simply saying, well, other people do it more. That's not how moral logic works. I'm going to use, yes, an extreme example here, but I want to show you how this kind of thinking, say that the rich, and unfortunately, there's a tiny grain of truth to this, actually, get away with raping people sometimes. Right? Or they do it more or something like that. Something obviously immoral and evil. Obviously, I'm not saying shoplifting is the same as that. I'm intentionally testing the theory here. You could never justify an immoral action simply by pointing out that other people or more powerful people do it more and get away with it, if it's actually an immoral action. And if you agree that stealing is immoral, then you can't justify doing it by simply saying they do it more. It's literally like the, well, he started it logic of a kindergarten brawl. And yet, this is one of the most highly feted progressive intellectuals, constantly given these extremely horny profiles by mainstream media outlets. It is quite something, but guys, there's so much more to unpack here. Heads up, guys, a new Candace Owens conspiracy theory just dropped. Okay, just kidding. She hasn't unveiled a new one quite yet, and frankly, I can't handle another dive into the world of Candace Owens at the moment, but I did want to let you guys know that thanks to our channel partners at Kalshi, you can actually get in on the action and take your guess as to whether Brigitte Macron will win a defamation suit against Candace Owens before 2028. And of course, this is all in connection to Candace's pretty dubious claims that are the documentary she did is slightly suspect, in my opinion, about whether or not Brigitte Macron has a penis. Yes, that's where we're at. Anyway, apparently people think there's a 63.9% chance that Brigitte will win a defamation suit against Candace Owens. If you ask me, I would not be nearly so confident. And if you want to, using promo code BRADP, you can play $20 and get $20 free to place a prediction on this. I would lean towards no, actually, that Brigitte will not win. Not because Candace hasn't done Brigitte dirty, but simply because the bar for defamation is so high, and sort of believing your own psychosis is kind of a defense against defamation. So I'm actually... let's say I'm bullish on Candace Owens winning that lawsuit, even if I think a lot of the claims and coverage that she's done about Brigitte are ridiculous. It's just the way the legal system works. Anyway, guys, you can use the link in the description or just promo code BRADP when you sign up for Kalshi to go ahead and play $20 and get $20 free. And regardless, thanks to Kalshi for sponsoring, and let's get back to today's episode. Anyway, let's keep watching the clip.
Dilemma is the fact that the automated process that they designed, these companies know will increase shrink, right? So it's actually factored in. The lemons that you stole are factored into the bottom line of these mega corporations regardless, and they still end up having increased profit margins because they no longer have to pay the cashiers that they used to hire, as opposed to this automated system, knowing full well that people are still going to be able to steal a lot more efficiently, as a matter of fact, through the automated process.
Okay, let's pause here. So when he talks about shrinkage, that's just the industry term for stealing, for people that steal stuff. And sure, it is factored in the sense that corporations set... Also, I love how he's like blasting like record profits, as if grocery isn't one of the industries with like notoriously thin profit margins. And it actually is, if you look into it, like very small, like 2% average profit margins or something like that. It is not one of those industries where it's, running massive profit margins as it's a relative amount. And yet, our genius over here is saying, well, it's factored in, so you can just do it and whatever. Well, if more people do it, what he's saying is that like, oh, well, they assume a certain X amount of stealing, so they factor that into prices anyway. Only because people keep doing it, first of all. And if more and more people do it, the amount they factor in will increase. Like, do you know what factor in means? It doesn't mean it imposes no costs. When you are stealing stuff, not only are you violating the rights of others and basic principles of like property rights that allow society to function and economies to grow and flourish, and you're just doing something fundamentally immoral. And in this case, it's not like we're talking about in most of these cases, we're not talking about the mom stealing a loaf of bread to feed her starving child. By the way, also food stamps exist, but like even that is like highly dubious. But people aren't stealing that. They're like stealing makeup and electronics and all sorts of, and candy and all sorts of stuff. That's just not what this is. So let's not deflect to the poor little Robin Hood shtick, okay? Anyway, Hasan here saying it's factored in. I don't think they know what that means. But yes, when you steal, you are imposing costs on your community, on everyone else. Some of them are like small costs that ultimately just amount to like annoyance. For example, I hate that when I go into a CVS in Washington, D.C., I have to get them to unlock the toothpaste or whatever, right? Thankfully, I now live in Florida, and that's not the case. Different vibes, different energy. But I have lived in areas where that is the case. Same with Michigan, not the case there. But you go to New York City or you go to Washington, D.C., any of these like urban areas where they at least for a while, we're not really cracking down on this stuff. And yeah, that does happen. And that imposes costs and annoyance on everyone else, but also prices, also obviously. And there's some cases where stealing and looting in particular. And I watched this whole interview. Wow, it was really a doozy. They talk about the main host, the New York Times culture editor, tries to make micro looting a thing, like a term. She really thought she did her big one, that she cooked with that. She did not. That's just called stealing. Like you're just a ratchet thief at that point, but you're trying to make like a cute Marxist lefty Gen Z TikTok slang word for it. I'm not actually gonna let that fly around here. But anyway, obviously you're imposing costs on the community. Stores literally sometimes have to close due to this. And we've seen that in California and other places. And more than anything, I mean, it obviously imposes costs on everyone else through higher prices. So it's like fundamentally wrong. And they don't understand what factoring in means. And they're just doing what about more, which is not moral logic, right? It's just distraction. So we're off to a great start here, folks. Now let's keep watching Hasan, because I guess that's what we have to do today.
Process.
Totally. Well, I was looking things like, and shrinkage is roughly equal internally as externally. Like they expect it from their employees that they are sort of disenfranchising constantly.
Yeah. But what about the argument that if everyone just starts stealing wantonly from these self-checkout machines, Whole Foods will eventually raise the prices?
Yeah, chaos, full chaos. Let's go. I mean, look.
So he just doesn't care. Like, champion of the working people here, Hasan Piker is like, yeah, I don't care if I understand it won't affect you and your like $3 million home and your millions of dollars of net worth, but actually I do care if struggling people have to get, they're using Whole Foods, which is obviously a little bit higher end, but these same principles apply to literally every grocery store. It's like, who cares? Burn the whole system down. Like, that is the difference between Hasan Piker and any sort of normal liberal or normal Democrat, is that he really does want to reject the rules that allow our society to function and coexist without descending into chaos. And he really does openly want not to reform any sort of system or civilization that we've built and turned into, one of the greatest civilizations to ever exist in all of human history. He just wants to burn it all to the ground. He does not care. And he's, at least to his credit, he's not particularly shy about that fact. Here we go. Let's let him yap.
I mean, look, I'm in favor of fast and free buses and also government-owned storefronts. And, two of those policies, the mayor of this beautiful city is currently working on.
Would you encourage stealing in the same way from a Mamdani-run city-owned grocery store with lower prices? And why?
I would not. Because I feel like that's taxpayer funded, and the prices are this union labor, and the prices are also adjusted regardless.
I think that hypothetical.
Stop. Maybe I was wrong about the culture editor over at the New York. No, I wasn't wrong about her, and she did a terrible job of this interview overall. But that's actually a pretty good follow-up question. Probably the only challenging follow-up question she asked Hasan Piker the whole time, but still. And there is just like, that is so inconsistent. No, you can't steal from the government. Like, to be clear, I don't support the idea of government-run grocery stores, and they're already turning into a massive boondoggle in New York City. This little experiment with socialism that Hasan's so giddy about. It's not going to open till like 2029, and it's running way more expensive than what it costs a private company to open a grocery store. Shock. What a shock. What a surprise. This is my stunned face, right? But Hasan here is saying you can't steal from that because it will impose. I don't think you should steal from either. If they do exist, I don't support stealing from like in Virginia, there's government-run liquor stores, which I don't support that, but it exists, and I think it's wrong to steal from it in the same way. It imposes costs on everyone else, so you can take things you're not entitled to that aren't yours. I think that's wrong if you do it to a private company, and I think it's wrong if you do it to a government-run store. He's trying to say that it's not wrong to do it to Whole Foods, because then you're just stealing from Jeff Bezos or whatever, because he has no understanding of how things actually work. But it is wrong to do it from a government-run grocery store, because then, well, that's paid for by taxpayers, so that everyone will have to bear the cost of. That's also how shoplifting works, Hasan. I don't know how to explain this to you any simpler, but it's just a very glaring inconsistency there. Like, and elsewhere in the interview, and I didn't clip this part, he says that he wouldn't steal a library book, but he would steal a car. It's like, really, and that part was maybe meant a little tongue in cheek. I can get that. I can pick up on that. But it was really remarkable stuff. Like, this interview was just all over the place. And they really have so little self-awareness that they're sitting in this bougie set that the New York Times, all these elites talking as if they really do all cosplay as if they're like Katniss Everdeen. And in fact, they're like residents of the Capitol.
That hypothetical is interesting, right? Because if you look at it from a categorical imperative type thing, what if everybody did this? You know, the converse is like, oh, what if every major grocery chain stole from workers and consumers? And that is basically true, right? Like,
girl, what? When I love these things, I love the things that these media elites do, where they say, they intentionally try to make themselves sound smart by using unnecessary, like, so when I was learning, because listen, my background's in writing, I've been a reader my whole life, I have a pretty advanced vocabulary. But I was taught pretty early on as a writer and as a communicator that you should use the simplest words possible without losing meaning. So using additional words, or more complicated words or SAT vocabulary words is fine if that's like necessary to convey the thing you're talking about. But when you just unnecessarily say things in intentionally like convoluted ways to show off your SAT vocabulary like this, well, if you think about it as like a categorical imperative, you just mean, what if everyone did this? So just say that. Like, it's like you're trying to intellectually pleasure yourself or make yourself seem like some great intellect of our time. And she's very much not, by the way. She came off arguably worse than Hasan in this interview. But it's just that's annoying to me. And in fact, it annoys me so much, I forget what she even actually said. Oh, she said, well, maybe if all the stores weren't constantly stealing from their workers and their consumers, which I don't understand that. So the workers thing is about the wage theft, which we will come to, and is a thing and is wrong, and I do think should be cracked down upon, but it's like, in the grand scheme of things, relatively minor amounts of money. So it's like a tiny percentage of total wages that are paid out are stolen via wage theft, which, okay, still wrong, still bad. What the hell is she talking about when she says stealing from consumers? I have never been robbed by Whole Foods. Have you? What? How do grocery stores steal from consumers? That's literally not a thing unless you somehow, in your twisted socialist brain, define mutually voluntary exchanges where I choose to purchase something from Whole Foods at the price they want to sell it as them robbing me. I do not define it that way because I think that is crazy. And at that point, you have defined down theft to the point of meaninglessness. But guys, I was about to say we're making great progress working our way through this clip. Then I looked down and realized we're almost 20 minutes into the podcast. We've only gone through 2 minutes of footage. So maybe I should shut up for a minute and let Miss Socialist Vocabulary Queen yap a little more.
true, right? Like, it's interesting. Like, I think it speaks to the thing where a kind of harm committed by the individual strangely continually draws more ire than the same harm being committed by structure. And so, I kind of am inclined towards this. It's like, everyone try it, see what happens.
Yeah, rules are already designed in a way where if you steal from the poor, you become rich. If you steal from the wealthy, you go to prison. So there's only one direction where you can do unlimited theft and erode the social contract for the 99%. There's an invisibility baked into the system that allows the wealthy to engage in this sort of behavior. Because
oh wait, we'll come to his final point about the wage theft in a moment. But I just think this is an interesting idea. If you steal from the wealthy, you go to jail. But if the rich steal from the poor, they're unpunished. I think it's true that sometimes when the rich steal from the poor or the average middle class or what have you, they get away with it. And that's wrong. They're certainly prosecuted sometimes. I mean, there's lots of high profile white collar crime that's prosecuted, but I think anybody who steals should be cracked down upon. So to the extent what he's identifying describes a real phenomenon, I'm obviously in agreement with him that those people should be punished. But the problem is he just means that like commerce is what he means by stealing, or like voluntary labor agreements he views as theft through like Marxist theory and other things. So that's where you get really astray. And like, what is he talking about where they're just allowed to do infinity theft unpunished? That's like not really a thing, actually. And when you are so intentionally or unintentionally hyperbolic and extreme in your claims, they just lose kind of credibility. Obviously, people cannot just do infinite theft. And obviously, that's also not the only way to get rich. Like, I agree there are some unethical ways to make lots of money, but generally speaking, the billionaires in America or the multi-millionaires made their money in ways that are legal, first of all, and then two, involve creating some sort of service or product that tons of people use or benefit from. And I feel like he just overlooks that fact. They actually stole all their money from everyone. That's not true. Obviously, there's some examples where people make money in unethical ways, but he pretends like that's the norm. And I just don't think that it is. Now we'll get to his final point where he talks about wage theft, which is a very interesting concept to me that I looked into a little more to discuss. Let's listen.
Because, I mean, it's a cliche at this point, but like wage theft is the most consequential amount of theft that takes place in the United States of America.
So let's unpack this because this is very interesting. Wage theft refers to essentially when you don't pay your workers what they are entitled to. So you're like robbing them of the wages they're entitled to. So this can happen through different forms, through not giving people overtime pay that they're entitled to illegally, through paying people under the minimum wage and getting away with it, from not paying people, or misclassifying people as independent contractors when they're legally supposed to be classified as employees. All these things can add up to what they call wage theft. And like, I think that's bad. I think that's very harmful. I think you are entitled to your legal wage that you are entitled to, and employers who do not give that to you should be held accountable. And maybe you could argue that they're not held accountable enough and we should crack down on it more. I don't disagree. However, it doesn't follow. So therefore we should steal too does not follow. And the idea that it's more consequential than other theft, I'm not sure is actually true. So progressive sources like the EPI, the Employment Policies Institute, they say there's about $15 billion in wage theft due to minimum wage violations. And when you combine that with the other forms of wage theft, which they do define very broadly, but I'll just take at face value for the purposes of this, you get an estimate of somewhere between $30 to $50 billion a year in wage theft. And that is, of course, in the context of trillions of dollars of wages being paid out. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that's not a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively minor percentage of wages. And then, is it the most consequential? Like, is it the biggest aspect of theft in American society? Like, numerically, no. Shoplifting, according to Capital One research, is estimated to be about $47.8 billion a year, and only 2% of shoplifters get caught, according to this research. This is a really remarkable statistic. The average shoplifter is arrested once out of every 100 incidents. That's crazy, by the way, and that's totally unsustainable and should be enforced more as well. But so I'm not here telling you wage theft is non-existent, not bad, not a problem, but I'm not agreeing that it's massively more consequential than other forms of theft. And again, it's not a moral justification to do your own immoral thing. And that's how it's weaponized often by these leftists and progressives. And I just find that to be totally intellectually bankrupt and indefensible. But that's just me. And again, guys, I said this earlier and I meant it. We have not gotten to the crazy part of this New York Times interview. The part where like encouraging stealing is crazy. There's bad economics here. But here's like, we haven't gotten to the part that threatens the core fabric of civil society. And we're about to. And this is when they talk about, of course, the murder of Brian Thompson, the health insurance CEO who was allegedly killed by Luigi Mangione, and people celebrated because they found Luigi hot and they agree with it because they don't like health insurance and how it works in this country, which, trust me, I agree. There's lots of problems with it. Anyway, when this was brought up, Hasan responded in his initial response to this being brought up without ever once indicating in any way that he thought it was bad to murder health insurance CEOs or that he did not support it, and instead waxed poetically, but incoherently, as we will get to, about like intellectual or moral justifications for this kind of vigilante assassination, which is explicitly, according to the prosecutors, intended to send a political message about the health insurance industry, which, by the way, there's a word for that. Targeting civilians with violence to send a political message. There's a word for that. I was reading about it. The FBI has like a whole definition listed on their... Oh, it's terrorism. Yeah, domestic terrorism. And Hasan waxed poetically about why it's intellectually or morally can be justified. And the New York Times clapped along, uncritically amplified it with no follow-ups or pushback, and then just distributed it to millions of people with their prestige and brand attached. Everything here is going amazing. This is totally normal and fine. I don't know, man. Let's watch this next clip.
When you feel this much anger and it doesn't feel like there's hope for it to be changed in a regulatory way, I think that's when you get to things like killing the CEO of United Healthcare and there being an outpouring of glee for murder online because it feels like finally someone can actually do something about healthcare. I think 40% of Gen Zers felt that that murder was morally justified. But it's scary to be in a society where people feel that murder is morally justified. And I'm curious how we thread that line.
Yeah. Engels wrote about the concept of social murder.
So we're going to get to that. But let's like unpack that. She sets this up in an actually semi-reasonable way where she says like, it's scary to be in a society where people are justifying murder. And then she says, how do we thread this line? And what a normal person would open with, like a sane person who has progressive views about healthcare policy, would say, of course, like murdering someone in cold blood is evil and is not a solution and helps nothing. But we do have a broken system that costs people's lives, and we need to be pushing harder for Medicare for all or whatever it is that you believe in. Instead, Hasan responds by immediately diving into a pseudo-intellectual justification for assassinating in cold blood a father or a CEO who, as far as I'm aware, had done nothing illegal, even if you find some of it, though the industry unethical or what have you. And I think that's telling and deeply revealing that is how he responds to this setup. Anyway, now let's listen to his full thing, and then I'll explain why I think the concepts he's espousing here are so like morally and everything, economically, spiritually bankrupt. But let's listen to him expound.
And Brian Thompson, as the United Healthcare CEO, was engaging in a tremendous amount of social murder, the systematized forms of violence, the structural violence of poverty, the for-profit paywalled system of healthcare in this country, and the consequences of that are tremendous amounts of pain, tremendous amounts of violence, tremendous amounts of deaths, and that was a fascinating story for me because Americans are very draconian about crime and punishment. They're very black and white on this issue, and yet because of the pervasive pain that the private healthcare system had created for the average American, I saw so many people immediately understand why this death had taken place. Even before they knew who the shooter was or what the motive was, we had universalized this pain, so much so that virtually every American has a similar experience, a shared experience where they have a loved one that spent their last days, instead of spending them with their family, spending it on the phone, talking to their healthcare provider, to maybe get a little bit of economic respite so they don't carry on medical debt for their next generation, for their next of kin. That's a harrowing process for a lot of people. And for them, that is murder. For them, that is torture. And that is the reason why I think the reaction to Luigi Mangione, especially by younger generations was not so negative.
So that is his entire response to this question that was posed by the interviewer. Now, they come back to this at the very end, and I will get to that. And he does, when forced to give a smash or pass, he does say to murdering health insurance CEOs, he says no. But that's at the end. This is not rapid fire. So when the subject is initially broached, he goes on for minutes about a pseudo justification for the act and never suggests it's wrong or condemns it in any way, and basically goes on to justify it. I think even while being charitable to Hasan, that he did technically later on with a single breath say, no, I guess people shouldn't really do more murders. Obviously, the net effect of his advocacy and his emphasis and his explanation is to defend this action, I think is still fair to say, even though he technically disavows it in a single word later. And that's why I think it's so important to unpack. Like, even if we accept Hasan Piker's premise that health insurance CEOs, through the rationing of healthcare that has been put on their shoulders. Of course, it happens in every healthcare system. It's just different people doing it. Obviously, in a socialized healthcare system, people still sometimes don't get the care they need. There are long waiting lists, and I'm not sure that means that the people running the NHS or Canada's Health Service murdered people. But even if we accept this extremely debatable premise that these health insurance CEOs are responsible for people's deaths by denying people's coverage, does that therefore justify murdering them? They were never charged with this social murder crime. They were never given any sort of chance to defend themselves from it. They were never found guilty from a jury of their peers, in which case maybe then you'd think the death penalty for people who are convicted of murder, but just, I think this person's guilty of murder, so I get to go shoot them and kill them. Well, it's justified if you read Engels and his theories about social murder. Okay, then, I mean, let's flesh this logic out. Is Barack Obama, under Hasan Piker's logic, then, is he guilty of social murder? He designed Obamacare. He designed the current system that we're operating under in the health insurance. So maybe that makes him valid, right? Maybe he's guilty of social murder in the minds of some depraved individual out there. And since we're just doing this all extrajudicially, there's no like actual finding of guilt necessary or any sort of due process or rights or civil liberties. Watch out. Watch your back, Barack. Now, of course, I think that's psychotic and evil, but he has yet to explain that. And like, what about, for example, he's in this case focused on United Healthcare, which has a particularly bad reputation for like denying claims, but all health insurance providers deny claims and at varying different levels, but even like Medicaid and Medicare deny coverage of sometimes important and necessary things. Does that mean that the government officials who run those programs are guilty of social murder? And are they fair game for assassination? That like, do you not see how there's no limiting principle here for this kind of moral excuse making for vigilante murder? And I mean, that's only even just focusing on health insurance. But there's actually so many, like very many industries or businesses that are perfectly legal. And so they're not violating the law, but people view as unethical or even costing human lives. You know what a great example is? Well, no matter how you feel about the issue, you can't deny that this is a clear example of exactly what I just described, the abortion industry and doctors who provide abortions. Even when in the state they're doing it in, it is perfectly legal, there are people out there who believe that those individuals are engaging in murder, social murder, or actually just literal murder, and view their actions as unethical. I would say that the correct solution there is to advocate for pro-life laws, if that's your belief, and to work to change the system, not to go murder people or go, But Hasan, what are you going to say then? Or what are these people that he's, white knighting for going to say? There's no argument that Luigi Mangione is justified that is not essentially employing the same logic of the crazy abortion clinic bomber. Show me on the doll where that's a lie. All right, that sentence makes no sense, but you guys get what I'm saying, how it's just the same logic with a different ideological or political or moral or emotional valence or emphasis. And they don't seem to see that, because I'm confident, I can't say I've personally seen a clip of him speaking about it, but I can speak with near 100% certainty that Hasan Piker would find somebody who assassinated an abortion provider to be evil and reprehensible. He would not, if asked about it, his response would not be to leap into the justification for it without once initially saying it's bad or wrong. Something tells me it would go a little differently if that was the topic and how it was framed, but the principle at stake is the same. And I think what's interesting as well, and somebody even pointed this out on Twitter, and Hasan was like, wow, look, the pro-Israel people want me murdered. It's like, well, no, they're applying your logic to you. They don't actually want this, but also, like, did you just admit that therefore you want other people murdered? Anyway, someone pointed out that according to Hasan's theory, which to be fair to him is not like, does not originate with him. It's a socialist theory going back, many, many hundreds of years. And social murder, right? He believes, or he suggests, at least in this portion of the podcast, can justify assassination. Well, Hasan Piker is worth many millions of dollars. He lives in a home that's nearly estimated at about $3 million that he owns. He wears expensive clothing and jewelry, and he otherwise, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but he sort of does. So he otherwise lives like far beyond what is actually necessary to survive. I don't think anybody would dispute that characterization of Hasan Piker's lifestyle. So here's the question. If he could just live in a modest home or apartment and wear clothes from Target and, not have expensive jewelry or these other things, and he could allocate those resources to save people's lives. So according to GiveWell, it costs roughly $3,000 to $5,500 to save a human life via charitable giving. So if we kind of extrapolate that logic, Piker is actively choosing to engage in social murder and let hundreds, if not thousands, depending on how much money he has exactly, which I guess I don't know, of people die every year by hoarding his wealth and denying them access to the resources that they need to survive that he could give them and chooses not to. Legally, is entitled to not give them. Obviously, the health insurance example is a little more direct and imminent, but is it not the same principle that by hoarding wealth and resources and denying them to people whose lives they would save, you're engaged in a form of social murder that could justify assassination? I really struggle to see how that could not be applied to Hasan Piker and used as a justification for him to be hunted down and killed, which I don't want, don't support, do not call for, and would be mortified and horrified by. To be extremely clear, I don't want to leave any doubt in your mind. What I'm pointing out is that he is advocating, or at least defending and explaining away, a logic that could theoretically endanger basically most successful people, including himself. And it is not like inciting violence to point out that his own logic applies to him. I'm not saying I support it. I explicitly disavow that rhetoric. I'm just pointing out the inconsistency and showing him, trying to help him understand why maybe applying that logic to others is fundamentally unfair. I guess the other aspect of this that really goes unexplored, because again, no follow-ups for Hasan, no pushback. Journalism of the year, get her a Pulitzer, the culture editor at the Times. But it's worth asking this, like, even if you believe the health insurance system is evil and costs human lives and everything, they have yet to articulate how murdering one CEO who was then replaced, and then, if anything, that story made people sympathetic to, like, health insurance, a little more sympathetic than they were before, to see this father brutally hunted down and killed. How that affected change or helped anyone or improved anything at all. It did not. So there's not even I don't even believe, like, ends justify means morality. But even if you do, there's not really ends here. It's just nihilistic terrorism. But Hasan Piker very clearly at this point has a soft spot for that. That's just indisputable. Now, I will play you this one clip from the very end where Hasan does, when forced to, say no to whether people should murder health insurance CEOs. It's very big of him. I want to give him credit. No, in the spirit of fairness, I don't want to take him out of context. I don't want to just show the clip that pushes a certain narrative and not the other narrative. I will show the full context of everything. and then we'll discuss. Watch this.
Okay, so because we have talked about so many different things, let's give like sort of a smash or pass, yes or no style summary. Steal from Whole Foods?
Sure.
Sure.
Burn down your employer's warehouse?
No.
But we're about to get to the key part where they talk about like the Brian Thompson situation. But listen, I'm not above a little bit of like levity and unseriousness. Like I host an entire podcast, Normal Gaze, that's just a comedy podcast, comedy political podcast. It's totally unserious. But I'm not the New York Times. And I'm not I would suggest that maybe call me a prude. Call me old fashioned if you want. Call me crazy right wing conservative. Maybe the New York Times is a little bit above playing smash or pass with a series of increasingly violent crimes. Am I in the upside down world? Context here, by the way. The Times revolted, like internally, their woke writers revolted over an opinion editor publishing an article by a Republican senator saying send in the troops to stop the riots where people were dying and businesses were being destroyed in 2020. And they argued that simply publishing an opinion article articulating, whether you agree with it or not, a widely held view, put Black lives in danger of the staff of the New York Times. You can go up, it's the Tom Cotton affair at the New York Times. You can go read about it. It was a massive scandal and a black eye on journalism. And what I find so fascinating about that is that if you're in any sense right-coded or Republican or conservative-coded, you are advocating for a particularly strong law and order approach, that is considered to endanger people's lives, which I totally disagree with and I think is ridiculous. But this conversation with leftists who've called for Republican senators and said they should be murdered, by the way, Hasan has said that, where they discuss justifications for assassinations in very positive terms, that's fine and doesn't endanger anyone. Now, I don't necessarily believe that it does literally endanger people. I think it contributes to a conversation that is dangerous, but I'm not a believer that words are literally violence or whatever. But since they are, like the people inside the New York Times, many of the journalists do believe that, the fact that they find the Tom Cotton op-ed, which you can go back and read, in hindsight, he looks kind of correct, low key, but whatever, whether you agree with it or not, it's an op-ed by a senator articulating a widely held perspective on matters of law enforcement. The idea that publishing that was somehow inappropriate for the Times and endangered human beings, but publishing this kind of softball with a leftist extremist employing justifications, pseudo-intellectual justifications for assassinations is fine, is like a double standard so extreme it feels ridiculous to even refer to it as a standard, because clearly it's not a standard at all. Sorry, anyway, let's watch the rest of this clip.
My lawyers are telling me to answer in the negative.
Murder the CEO of a healthcare company?
Also, no.
No.
I love how, like, begrudgingly they have to say no to that. They're like, I guess if you really pull my arm, I have to say no to that. Like, my lawyers want me to say no. It's not exactly the most impassioned condemnation of violence you'll discover, but I think in the spirit of fairness, a lot of people who are covering this Hasan interview played the first clip but didn't actually watch the full interview, so they never discovered the last clip that I just showed you, and I think it's unfair to not include it. But to me, it's like when you were actually asked about this, you expounded for several minutes on moral justifications for the assassination and never condemned it or suggested it was bad in any way. And he has, in his content and his streaming, been extraordinarily sympathetic and favorable to Luigi Mangione. And then at the very end, when forced to like yes or no, you're like, no, technically I don't support the murder. I would almost respect you more. I mean, I'd still think you're evil and crazy, but I'd almost respect you more if you said yes to that, because clearly that's what you actually believe. In my view, this is just my opinion. Clearly that's what he actually believes based on the totality of his commentary. But he's like giving himself just enough plausible deniability here. I think that's what that was. But people can decide for themselves whether they think he truly condemns this kind of violence and whether they believe that. But I wanted to include it in the spirit of fairness. And then I'll just show you this one final clip. It just shows you how crazy this other bitch is, by the way. This writer, this New Yorker writer, listen to this.
What is one thing that shouldn't be okay, but currently is?
So many things. Extraction of surplus labor value.
Oh my God, cringe.
Great, you went really silly with it. I appreciate that.
Exploitation.
Yeah, anything above Mao. I think New York should charge people to park on the street, which, I mean, I park on the street, but I think that's just that's an access to a large amount of public money that we should be taking.
Like everyone who does street
You're going to
parking.
get assassinated
I
for that.
know,
Day.
but I think it's true.
Someone's going to fight you.
I think it's true. I also think private schools should be mostly illegal.
Oh, I agree with that. That's a
Yeah.
good one. Yes.
You are going to piss off all the drivers of New York
I
City
know.
with
Yeah.
public
Driving their
street.
kids to private school. Yeah, it's a huge problem. Yeah.
So, like, we could do a whole nother episode on them both agreeing and laughing that private school should be illegal. Like, they really do not have respect for freedom or parental autonomy. They think they own your children. And not only will you double pay for school if you want to send your child to private school, you will still have to pay taxes to fund local education that your children will not be making use of or consuming. And then you have to pay your private school tuition on top of that. They think that should literally be illegal because they want to presumably brainwash the children, or they might call it like educate. I don't even know. That's crazy to me. And that's like another thing that most people didn't notice because they just watched the 2-minute clip that was clipped of the interview. When you actually watch the whole thing, there's often gems that the clippers don't notice. Wow. Just wow. Anyway, I don't know, man. I'll leave it there for this episode of the Bread versus Everyone podcast. We will be back with more, probably not Monday because I'll be on a trip. So after that, but thank you so much for tuning in. But do hit the like button if you haven't yet. Do consider becoming a channel member to support my work. We'll be back with more next week.